Detroit City of Champions, the podcast. I'm Jamie Flanagan.
Charles Avison.
Charles, it's a big football weekend in Detroit, man. People are excited about our Detroit Lions again. I love like people are like so stoked about the Lions that I'll be like, hey, you know when they won their first one? And then I'm on 20 minutes talking about the podcast and the 1935 City of Champions story. So
as soon as I hear City of Champions, I want to start rolling, man. There's a lot to say.
I know. So, but this weekend, on December 10th, they're going to be playing the Bears, right? And the Lions are looking for their 10th win of this season, of the 23-24 season. And this rivalry with the Bears goes back a ways. I was like, God, how far back does it go? Because we had Neil Rule on, and we talked about the Green Bay rivalry, which was, the Iron Man game and all that. But what about the Bears? What's the rivalry with the Lions and the Bears? How far back does that go?
Well, that's what's interesting. The normal sort of thought process when somebody talks about the rivalry with the Packers and the Bears is to just assume that it's like, well, it's because of the proximity. The Detroit's in very close to Chicago, and we have rivalries with nearby cities. That's just the way sports are, and there's a lot to be said for that. But there's actually a really interesting wrinkle with the Detroit Lions specifically, in that is that whereas the Packers started out in Green Bay and the Bears started out in Chicago, the Lions actually started out in Portsmouth, Ohio. And so what's interesting, so the interesting, dynamic of that is, there was existing rivalries with, with the Detroit Tigers and the Chicago White Sox, or especially like Chicago Cubs, because the Cubs had beaten the Tigers twice in the World Series in the early 1900s. So there was that, sort of natural, sports rivalry in that capacity. But the rivalry with the Lions, actually, with the players, because the players that came from Portsmouth, Ohio, were virtually identical. They were a fantastic team in Portsmouth, Ohio, when they're the Spartans, and they built up a tremendous rivalry with the Bears and the Packers players while they were in Portsmouth. And so when the Spartans came to Detroit, the rivalry between the players was
rolled right over. Yeah,
was a blood feud, and so so it fit right in with the natural rivalry with the Detroit fans versus those other two cities. So. But what's interesting though is that when the Lions came to Detroit, they didn't just start off as like a sort of an expansion team. They were a fantastic team, and the Lions of that time, when 1934 when they arrived, had Dutch Clark, who alongside Bronco Nagurski, you could make a case for the two best players in the NFL, and so if you want to plumb a little bit deeper, is that it was sort of the difference between the two players was an interesting one, because Bronco Nagurski was just a pure bully player, a pure power. He was a power fullback, but some places but a lot of times they just used him as like a blocking back, because he was such a beast that he could just maul holes for faster backs, and he also played defensive tackle too. So the Bears had this kind of like around Bronco Nagurski, that arguably the best player in the game. They had sort of an ethos of being this team of bullies, like this like brute force, monster. I think they were called the Monster Midweight later on, but they had this ethos of being this like mauling type of a team. And then if they're good, they didn't win every year, but they were always at the top. But if they lost, they were still gonna beat the heck out of you. They're still going to pound you. That was their sort of ethos. That was their ethos. Whereas the Spartans had Dutch Clark, and Dutch Clark, of course, when he came to the Lions, they built him as the Ty Cobb of football. That's how the Lions were based off the Tigers, is with their name. And Dutch Clark was marketed as the new Ty Cobb. And in essence, like, there's new Ty Cobb in town, and yeah, there he is right there. So he's billed as the new Ty Cobb. And so, but it's like, if you want to see Ty Cobb play again, because Cobb had long been retired, And they said, if you want to see the new Ty Cobb, well, now he plays at the University of Detroit Stadium. And so that was their hook. That was they were like, because the Tigers, of course, were heading to the 1934 World Series when the Lions got there. And so they're like, how excited you are about the Tigers? Well, now there's Ty Cobb's come back, but he's a football player now. He's over here playing football. And well, could they make that case? Because again, Dutch Clark was one of the best. You could make a case that he was right there with Bronco Nagurski as the two best players in the game. But Dutch was different. Dutch was fast. He was elusive. He was their fullback. He's a running back, as we call it, a quarterback. You call him a quarterback as today, because he'd pass the ball, he'd run the ball, punt the ball. And he played defensive back, and he was elite at every single position. Everything he did, he was elite. But he was known as a speed back, or as elusive, or incredibly intelligent. One of the greatest field generals, they said, like at that time, or potentially that there has been. I mean, he was an elite in every capacity, but he was not a mauler. He was not like he was different than Nagurski. And as such, that the Portsmouth Spartans and the Lions took on the role of their top flight football player, which was a more of like a team, like a team-based strategy where they were doing, all kinds of like misdirections, and like even their pass plays were all misdirections. So like those were the two different styles that they ran up against. And so what's interesting is that when the Spartans became the Lions, and they went into 1934, they took they took the Detroit by storm, because they won their first 10 games, and they didn't get scored upon for their first 7 games. So they had this incredible start to their season. And then they go into Thanksgiving game, their first Thanksgiving, which, every Thanksgiving they always go, oh, the Lions had just come to Detroit for their first Thanksgiving, and they got beat by the Bears. And so for the fans of Detroit, all of a sudden they're like, what the heck happened?
Yeah.
We just went 10-0 and we didn't get scored on our first 7. Our team is awesome.
Yeah.
And
is that still an NFL record, right? 7.
I believe so. Yeah, I believe it is.
Yeah.
I mean, 7 straight shutouts. I think I need to take a look again, but it's at least in the top. It's right up there. But they had this incredible start, and then it was the Bears who who knocked them off and who derailed them. And so that's what's interesting is that like the Lions fans are like, what happened? Like you just got knocked out. And really, it blew that, and another. I think they had one more loss after that, knocked them out of the play, even at any chance of the NFL championship in 34. And so then, and they're like, "Well, what happened? How did they get?" Now all of a sudden, the Lions, they're the Detroit fans who are new NFL fans, they're engaged, saying, "Well, who are these Bears? Like, what are they? I mean, they knew Bronco Nagurski. Even casual, football fans knew Bronco Nagurski was." But what I'm saying is, like, now they're engaged in the rivalry with them. You see, they're actually engaged with the rivalry. And one of the things that we talk about in the book, we talk about on the show, is the importance of these rivalries, because like you take the Michigan, U of M, Ohio State, they call it the game. It's like this massive, everybody's doing it. Well, it's like you might hate Ohio State, you might hate these other rivalry teams, or whatever. But that's what engages the fan interest. That's what keeps the games, interesting. And that's one of the, the rivalry with the Bears between the players on the field, and now the fans becoming even more engaged. Like, well, how can we beat them? Can we beat them next year? What's it gonna take to beat them next year? And so that's
been going since they got here and became the Lions, and even before.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. So the Lions are kind of interesting with their early history with those rivalries is unique, because it's sort of a dual thing, because the Detroit is a natural proximity to Green Bay, and they had also had a rivalry with the Packers, of course, but the Bears were the obstacle for them, because they had not even the Spartans had not beaten the Bears since 1931. Oh. And here it is, 1934, and the Bears knocked them out of the playoffs, out of the NFL championship. And so it wasn't until 1935, the following year, of course, where the Lions had a far less successful season early on, They went in. They went into their into the game. They had been beaten by the Packers. I think they were 4-3-1, but they were not. They were nowhere near what they had done the previous year. And when they faced, so they went against the Packers and took the worst beating that they'd taken as a squad. As you know, even with the when they were in the Spartans, they got really beaten really badly by the Packers, which really riled them up because they hated the Packers. Same thing. The Bears and the Packers were two teams they hated the most.
So this is all going to spill over into the game here in Detroit against the Bears here on December 10, 2023. So it's all gonna culminate there. Because again, another fair season underway here. So
I've drank the Kool-Aid on the Lions this year. I've imbibed deeply. I'm always thinking they're gonna do good, but this year I'm like, I've imbibed deeply.
Oh yeah, and they're having the best season they've had in forever.
Yeah, they're great. I love it.
Cheers to them for sure, man. It's great. So we're looking forward to our coverage on the Lions. Goes back to episode 11, I believe. Yeah, although we kicked off our conversation about the Lions on episode 11, it goes through episode 16. I'll link those for people to
have a look. We did a deep dive in the Lions history. We've been down to Portsmouth. We met with a lot of the people in Portsmouth. We've looked around the stadium that the Lions played in when they were the Spartans is still there. It's the exact same shape. I mean, it's an amazing. Portsmouth is amazing. We love going on there. Our friends down there. They're good people. Cool. Anybody, it's a sort of hidden gem is Portsmouth, Ohio.
Yep. All right, so there you go. Check out the previous episodes on the Lions. Go kick the Bears' butts. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, and thanks for joining us here on Detroit City of Champions.